Nas is one of the greatest writers of all time. From his storytelling to his metaphors, the way he maneuvers words to share his perspective on the world is a once-in-a-lifetime ability.
Because Nas is my favorite rapper, because it's Nas. Right. What do you mean? It's Nas. Nas is Nas. He's like ordained in our video game to be the best rapper and considered to be the best. You know what I mean? It's Nas. His name is synonymous with greatest, right? You know what I'm saying?
He's had one of the most consistent runs of lyricism ever, and there is nothing that can happen that would take away Nas's impact on hip-hop over the last 3 decades.
I go by the name of the Illmatical One, Nas, straight out of Queensbridge, New York.
When it comes to who you want us to cover next on our Deep Dive series, in the comment section, it was definitely written. So in this video, we are going to take a look at what Nas is like in the studio, straight from the mouths of artists like Q-Tip, Common, SWIZZ Beatz, and more. Most rappers, to some extent, represent where they're from through the music, but for Nas, New York City is the backdrop that all of his lyrics are painted over.
With different colors of broken glass, our bikes would catch flats a lot, but it was the terrain of champions.
New York wasn't just a state of mind for Nas, it was the environment that shaped the stories he told. It was the atmosphere that inspired every line and moved him to move the world. Here's RZA talking about Nas's ability to take all of the energy around him and channel it into a song.
Right, that's the whole thing of energy. How do we condense all that energy into this so that it could fuel that? And he's definitely one of those artists, MCs that does that. And he was doing it at 15, you know, like I said, I'm thinking I'm 4 or 5 years older than Nas. So I was always feeling, you know, my confidence of what I was doing, but I was like, this kid is only 15.
But speaking of moving the world, that was never really Nas's goal. A lot of people over the course of his career have talked about Nas having a complex of wanting to fix things or preach on songs, but here's what Nas had to say about it.
Young lady, she's like, Nas, you can't save the world. I said, I'm not trying. You know what I'm saying? I'm trying to save me in my head, you know, for what I'm seeing and dealing with out here. I'm trying to make some sense out of it.
For Nas, writing was something that helped him get out of his own head and properly flesh out his thoughts.
As a young man, my raps were about me still maintaining my sanity on a beautiful level in this ugly world. You are the one that can change your reality and uplift the art of rhyming by being brave and bold enough to try to do something that hasn't been done.
The way that Nas approaches a song isn't with the goal of finding an answer, but rather asking a question.
Every time I'm making songs, I never feel like I'm teaching. I'm really just saying what's in my head. Yeah, I got these ideas I want to share with y'all, and I don't know what y'all think about it, but you can add on, and in your life, you can say, maybe I sparked something in you that makes you go even further with it.
And not only are his songs conversation starters, but most of his songs actually start from a conversation.
I'd hit a track and me and Damien would talk, and Damien would have already an idea that he was thinking about. You know, he had several ideas. And all I had to do was really like, yeah, I was thinking about that the other day.
Each song means something different entirely to Nas, but they all seem to come from a personal place. Here he is explaining the meaning behind Car 85.
He had the hookups with the plug for everything and all of that. So I was a little dude, but we got him. It was like a little limo service. And you called for Car 85, and he was lit.
The way that Nas writes is just a flowing of thoughts from his mind to paper. But at first, this made it hard for him to break up his lyrics into actual songs rather than just long verses.
I loved it so much, I would write a lot, and I realized it wasn't a verse, it was a song. I'd have to find out when to end the rhyme. When should this verse end, and when should the next verse begin? If I'm gonna cut this whole long rhyme up into a song, then each verse has to make sense, has to be complete thought or a complete bunch of thoughts. So that meant I had to add a little bit more at the end, so that meant like, all right, I said something over here that I wasn't really clear about, so if I end the rap short right here, I don't finish the thought, so let me add a little more. So I'm cramming all this stuff, and then there's like so many words, right? Then I have to perform it on stage.
Plus, he realized it wasn't so easy to translate some of those songs onto the stage.
When I realized I had to do this on stage, because everybody else was like chilling at the crib. Exactly. I'm like, rappers are monkey flipping with the funky rhythm I'll be kicking. I I'm winded. And they're like, no, perform.
But his flows and rhyme schemes are so impressive that no matter what the subject is, he never sacrifices an ounce of the craft for the topic. Here's Eminem talking about how impressed he still is with Nas's rhyming ability.
There's too many moments that he had for me to even be able to count them. One of the reasons that I picked Halftime though is because there's some rhyme schemes on there that most rappers to this day probably can't do. And that's one of the things that has made Nas so great over his career. Like when he, cause when I blast the herb, that's my word. I'll be slaying them fast, doing this, that, and the third. But chill past the entree and let's lay a back up at John Jay and hit a matinee. He was rhyming entire sentences. And I'm like, what the is this?
Lupe Fiasco even has an entire song called King Nas because of his admiration for Nas's craft. Another thing about the way Nas writes that has to be mentioned is his storytelling ability, which might be unmatched in hip-hop. Here's J. Cole being extremely impressed when talking about Nas's I Gave You Power.
If you don't know, of course everybody here know, but I Gave You Power, this man is speaking from a first-person perspective from a gun, you know what I mean? From an inanimate object that doesn't exist. He gave this gun emotions. He gave this gun guilt, sorrow. He gave this gun like a taste for vengeance. He was mad. He was being abused. You know, and all of this in a gun. And when he played it for me, it's like a light bulb went off. Like I was like, oh my! I knew right there. I was like, oh my God, this nigga's the greatest. Like I knew it right then. All that fronting I was doing just came to a cease right there, and I knew that this was something that I was so thankful to be aware of, and that was at 11 years old. And then you print them out. So I would print these joints out, and I would print them up and hang them up on my wall. And literally, if you walk in my room, you might be like, what's wrong with this kid? I'm staring at the wall like this, just reading the lyrics because I wanted to know what it was like to be that good.
And here's 50 talking about the same song.
He had a song where he was the gun. It was one of those things that had a strong impression on hip-hop culture at that point. It was like, wow, like he had a good metaphor, it was strong, and it gave you a visual. And he's one of the great storytellers within, you know, hip-hop music culture.
Plus, who can forget Rewind, which even Ghostface calls the greatest rap storytelling record of all time, and I might have to agree, but let us know yours in the comments. In terms of the way he records these classics, the energy that Nas brings to the studio is always fresh, and he still seems to have the same excitement of someone who just started rapping even more than 2 decades into his career. Just look at how excited he is after hearing this beat from Hit Boy. Speaking of magic, when Nas was recalling his first ever studio session, that's probably the best word to describe it. Even as a teenager, it seemed like everyone around him knew where he was headed.
He gave me a shot on a new track they was recording. I spit one verse, just 16 bars, and y'all know the rest. Being the right guy with the right rhymes, in the right place, at the right time.
And it's crazy to think back at how young Nas was when he was making Illmatic. I think back to some people I knew, and even myself at 16, 17 years old. I had no clue about the world, no clue at how to master a craft. And this guy was creating, if not the greatest, one of the greatest albums of all time. It's crazy. And even long before that, he was a rap prodigy. Kool G Rap says that Nas was recording at his place long before Illmatic ever came out.
Nas was coming to my condominium in Queens and laying down tracks in my 16-track studio.
Really? This is before Illmatic?
This is before Illmatic.
Really?
Matter of fact, he met Church in my house.
But while Nas's natural gift and excitement for the craft brings a lot of energy into the studio, Nas also feeds off of the energy of others. There is a classic story about him recording Illmatic with a dozen of his friends in the booth at the same time. Listen to DJ Premier recall what he witnessed